It started as a joke, something to kill time during detention. None of us thought it would turn into a nightmare that haunts me every night. It was a Friday evening, and the school was nearly empty. Most students had already gone home, but not me, Jamie, Kyle, and Sarah. We were stuck in detention. The room was quiet except for the scratch of a pen as Mr. Benson, our teacher, graded papers. The clock ticked loudly, making the time drag. "This is boring," Kyle whispered. "We should do something fun." "Like what?" Jamie asked. Kyle smirked. "Ever heard of room 303? The name sent a chill down my spine. Room 303 was an old, abandoned classroom. Rumor said it was haunted. "Don't be stupid," Sarah hissed. "It's just a dumb story." "Then why's it locked?" Kyle teased. "Let's check it out." Reluctantly, we followed Kyle to the third floor. The hallway was silent, the lights flickering. "There it is," Kyle said, pointing to the door at the end of the hall. "Room 303. The faded number scratched into the wood looked like a warning. "Let's go back," Sarah said. But Kyle ignored her. He pulled a paperclip from his pocket and began to pick the lock. With a soft click, the door creaked open, revealing a dark room. "Nothing scary here," Kyle said as we stepped inside. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled stale. The broken desks piled in the corners added to the eerie feeling. Then the door slammed shut behind us. "What the hell?" Sarah cried, rushing to the door. It was locked again. "Very funny, Kyle," I said, but he swore it wasn't him. A loud thud echoed in the room, followed by whispers. Faint at first, then louder. "Let us out." "Why are you here?" "Run." My heart raced. The room grew colder, frost forming on the windows. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Its long limbs twisted unnaturally, and its eyes were black voids. We screamed. Sarah pounded on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Kyle grabbed a chair and threw it, but it passed through the figure like smoke. It raised its clawed hand, and the whispers grew louder. "Jamie!" I screamed as he was yanked to the wall, his body going limp. Sarah sobbed, and Kyle shouted, "We have to get out." We tried the window. Kyle pried it open, and Sarah climbed out first. As I followed, something cold wrapped around my ankle. I looked back. A shadow tendril pulled me toward the figure. Its voice whispered in my head, "Stay." Kyle grabbed my arms and pulled. Sarah threw a desk piece at the figure, and the shadow weakened. Kyle yanked me free, and we tumbled out the window. We ran until we couldn't see the school anymore. The police found Jamie's body in room 303. They said he died of a heart attack, but we knew better. The school was sealed off the third floor. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear whispers. They're calling my name. It all started with a dare. "Come on, Mia," Leah said, nudging me with her elbow as we stood by our lockers after school. The hallways were almost empty, the faint echo of distant conversations fading as students left for the day. "You've got to do it. You've heard the stories, right? No one's ever stayed in the school after sunset." I rolled my eyes, trying to seem braver than I felt. "That's just some stupid urban legend. There's no such thing as the shadow." Everyone in our school knew the story, a shadowy figure that appeared in the building after dark. Some said it was the ghost of a janitor who had died years ago. Others claimed it was something worse, something inhuman. Leah smirked. "If you're so sure, prove it. Stay in the school until 7. Alone." I hesitated, glancing down the long, dimly lit hallway. The flickering lights above the science wing made the shadows seem darker, heavier. "Fine," I said, though my stomach churned. "But if nothing happens, you owe me your lunch for a week." Leah grinned. "Deal." By 6:30, the school was quiet. The janitor had finished his rounds, and the staff had all gone home. The only sound was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of the old building settling. I sat in the library, the large windows showing the sky turning deep orange as the sun began to set. At first, it wasn't so bad. I scrolled through my phone, listening to music and texting Leah about how boring this dare was. So far, no ghosts, I typed with a smirk. But just as I hit send, the screen froze. The music cut out. My phone went black. I frowned, pressing the power button repeatedly. Nothing. The battery had been at 80% just a moment ago. I glanced around the library, the stillness suddenly feeling oppressive. That's when I heard a faint tapping sound, like fingernails on glass. My breath caught. Slowly, I turned toward the windows. The library had large panes of glass that overlooked the courtyard, now bathed in shadows as the sun dipped below the horizon. Tap. 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 It was coming from the farthest window. My heart pounded as I squinted, trying to make out what was there. At first, I saw nothing, just the dark shapes of trees swaying in the wind. But then something moved, a flicker of black against black. I shot out of my seat, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The tapping stopped. "It's just the wind," I whispered to myself, my voice trembling. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I grabbed my backpack and left the library, deciding to wait out the rest of the dare near the front entrance. At least there, I could make a quick escape if I needed to. The hallway outside was dimly lit, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. My footsteps echoed as I walked, each creak of the floorboards making me jump. Then I heard another sound, this one closer. I froze, straining to listen. They were soft at first, almost hesitant, but they grew louder, faster, as if whoever or whatever was running toward me. My chest tightened, and I spun around, shining the flashlight on my phone down the hall. Nothing. The corridor was empty, but the footsteps hadn't stopped. They were behind me now. I turned again, my heart racing. Still, nothing. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me like a weight. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking. The sound echoed back to me, hollow and mocking. Suddenly, the lights above me went out, plunging the hallway into darkness. My breath hitched. I fumbled with my phone, trying to turn the flashlight back on, but the screen remained black. That's when I saw it. A figure at the end of the hallway. Tall, thin, and completely black, like a shadow pulled free from the floor. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but its presence was suffocating. My legs felt like lead as I stumbled backward, my mind screaming at me to run. The shadow tilted its head, as if studying me. Then it started to move slowly at first, gliding across the floor without a sound. I turned and bolted, my sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. The hallway stretched endlessly in front of me, the exit seeming farther away with every step. I glanced over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. The shadow was closer, its form shifting and rippling like smoke. It didn't walk, it slithered, its movements unnatural and jerky. I rounded a corner and ducked into a classroom, slamming the door behind me. My hands shook as I locked it, pressing my ear against the wood. The hallway was silent. Maybe it was gone. But then I heard the faint sound of breathing, low and raspy, coming from inside the room. I turned slowly, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The desks were empty, the chairs neatly pushed in. But at the back of the room, near the windows, something moved. The shadow was there, pressed against the glass like a dark stain. Its eyes, or what I thought were eyes, glowed faintly, 2 pinpricks of pale light. It slid down from the window and started toward me, its form stretching and twisting as it moved. I backed away, my mind racing for an escape. The door was my only option, but the lock stuck as I fumbled with it, my fingers slick with sweat. The shadow was almost upon me, its presence filling the room like a dark cloud. Desperate, I grabbed a chair and hurled it at the figure. It passed through the shadow as if it were made of smoke, clattering uselessly to the floor. "Stay away!" I screamed, but the words felt hollow, powerless. The shadow reached for me, its dark tendrils curling through the air. Just as it was about to touch me, the lights flickered back on, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent light. The shadow recoiled, retreating to the far corner, where it seemed to dissolve into the darkness. I didn't wait to see if it would return. I flung the door open and ran, my lungs burning as I sprinted toward the front entrance. The doors loomed ahead, a beacon of safety. but when I reached them, they wouldn't budge. The handles were ice cold, frozen in place. "No, no, no," I whispered, yanking at the doors with all my strength. Behind me, the lights began to flicker again, the shadows in the hallway growing longer, darker. I turned, and there it was, standing in the center of the corridor. This time, it didn't hesitate. It surged toward me, faster than before, its form unraveling and reforming with every step. I screamed and darted down another hallway, my legs aching with the effort. Every door I tried was locked, every exit blocked. The school was a maze, twisting and turning, leading me deeper into its depths. Finally, I stumbled into the gymnasium, the large space echoing with my ragged breaths. The lights overhead flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the basketball court. I backed into a corner, clutching a broken mop handle I'd found near the bleachers. The shadow appeared in the doorway, its form filling the frame. It didn't rush this time. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if savoring my fear. "This isn't real," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "This can't be real." The shadow stopped a few feet away, its glowing eyes fixed on mine. For a moment, everything was still. Then it spoke. Its voice was a whisper, 1,000 voices layered on top of each other. "You called me." I shook my head violently. "No, I didn't. I didn't do anything." It tilted its head, the movement sharp and unnatural. "You stayed. You broke the rule. Now, you belong to me." Before I could react, the shadow lunged, enveloping me in darkness. It was cold, suffocating, like being submerged in ice water. I screamed, but no sound came out. The world around me dissolved, replaced by an endless void. When I woke up, it was morning. The sun streamed through the gymnasium windows, warm and bright. But something was wrong. The school was completely abandoned. Dust coated the floors, and the walls were cracked and faded, as if the building had been left to decay for years. I stumbled outside, desperate for answers. The town was the same, silent, lifeless, frozen in time. And in every shadow, I could feel it watching me, waiting. I was alone. Forever. It all started with detention. I wasn't a troublemaker, not really. I'd skipped a couple of classes that week, and Mr. Graham, the history teacher, decided to make an example of me. "Stay after school on Friday," he barked in front of the class, his beady eyes glaring over his glasses. "You need to learn some discipline." So there I was, sitting alone on a creaky wooden desk at 4:30 p.m., while the rest of my classmates were already heading home or out to start their weekends. The school was practically deserted. The hallways were eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that made you feel like you were being watched. Mr. Graham hadn't even stayed. "I'll be back to check on you," he'd said before leaving me in the empty classroom with nothing but a stack of worksheets and the fading afternoon light coming through the dusty windows. I tried to focus on the busy work, but my mind kept wandering. The school always felt different after hours. The usual hum of chatter and slamming lockers was gone, replaced by the occasional creak or groan of the old building settling. It was unsettling how the familiar hallways seemed darker, the corners shadowed and full of shapes that made my imagination run wild. A loud thud broke the silence, and I jumped, my pencil rolling off the desk. I froze, my heart pounding. It sounded like it had come from somewhere down the hall. I listened, straining my ears, but all I could hear was the distant hum of the overhead lights. "Probably the janitor," I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the unease. But deep down, I wasn't convinced. The minutes dragged on, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air felt heavy, like the building itself was holding its breath. I decided I needed a break. Stretching, I got up and wandered to the classroom door. Peeking into the hallway, I saw it was completely empty, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly overhead. I stepped out, my sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. The sound echoed down the long corridor, and I immediately regretted leaving the room. Something about the emptiness made my skin crawl. I turned back to go inside, but the door slammed shut on its own. I yelped and grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was like it had locked itself. My stomach dropped. "Mr. Graham." I called out, my voice shaky. "This isn't funny." No answer. I stepped back, trying to steady my breathing. The hallway stretched ahead of me, each classroom door closed and silent. Then I noticed something strange. The lights at the far end of the hall started flickering rapidly. The buzzing sound they made grew louder, almost deafening. And then they went out. The darkness crept closer, swallowing the hallway one light at a time. My pulse skyrocketed. I turned and ran in the opposite direction, my footsteps echoing wildly. The flickering lights seemed to chase me, plunging the corridor into pitch black as they went out one by one. I darted into another classroom, slamming the door behind me. My hands fumbled for the light switch, but it didn't work. The room was bathed in shadows, the only light coming from the faint glow of the stormy sky outside. I crouched beneath a desk, trying to quiet my ragged breathing. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, growing louder as they approached the door. My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. I clamped a hand over my mouth, afraid even the sound of my breathing would give me away. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. There was a long pause, then the handle jiggled. Whoever or whatever it was, they were trying to get in. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying they would go away. But instead, the handle turned with an agonizingly slow creak. The door opened. A shadowy figure stood in the doorway, tall and impossibly still. My stomach twisted in fear. It wasn't Mr. Graham. It wasn't anyone I recognized. The figure stepped into the room, its movements unnervingly smooth, like it was gliding. Its face was obscured in the dim light, but I could feel its gaze sweeping the room. It knew I was there. I held my breath, trying to make myself as small as possible. The figure moved closer, its footsteps unnaturally soft. It stopped near the desk I was hiding under, and I could see its feet bare, pale, and disturbingly long. My blood ran cold. Then, it crouched. Two glowing eyes peered at me from the shadows beneath the desk. They weren't human. They were too bright, too large, and filled with something that wasn't curiosity, it was hunger. I scrambled backward, letting out a panicked scream. The figure lunged, but I managed to kick out, catching it in the chest. It stumbled, and I took the opportunity to bolt for the door. The hallway was completely dark now, but I didn't stop to think. I ran blindly, my only goal was to get out of the building. Behind me, I could hear the thing giving chase, its footsteps rapid and uneven, like it was lurching after me on all fours. I reached the stairwell and flew down the steps two at a time, my legs burning with effort. I could hear it following, the sound of its nails or claws scraping against the walls. I burst into the main lobby, relief flooding through me when I saw the glass doors leading outside. I didn't hesitate. I barreled through the doors, ignoring the rain that immediately soaked me to the bone. I didn't stop running until I was halfway down the street, the school a dark silhouette behind me. Finally, I slowed, gasping for breath. My body ached, and I was trembling all over, but I was alive. I glanced back, expecting to see the creature following me, but the street was empty. I thought I was safe. Until I looked down. My hand was bleeding. At first, I thought I'd scraped it on something while running, but the wound was too precise, too deliberate. For long, parallel cuts ran down my palm, each one deeper than the last. And then I noticed the smell. It was faint, but unmistakable, a metallic tang, like rust. The same smell that had filled the air when the figure had crouched in front of me. That's when I realized something else. The streetlights around me were flickering, just like the ones in the hallway. And I wasn't alone. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision, slipping between the buildings. I turned to run again, but it was too late. The last thing I saw was a pair of glowing eyes, impossibly bright, staring at me from the darkness. And then everything went black.